Hi, I'm Anne-Marie Mediwake, and I'm here with Lindsey Deluce and Kelsey McEwen. Welcome to CTV Your Morning, the podcast.
This week, we're taking a look at the school cell phone ban put in place by the Ontario government 2 months ago. And we spoke with a teacher and a student to get their perspectives on whether the new rules are working.
And did you know Toronto Maple Leafs legend Matt Sandin's pregame routine included a nap and a good book? Maybe we're not so different after all. Sandin's new memoir covers life on and off the ice, and we spoke to him about it all.
Thanks for joining us, and don't forget, you can watch us live, CTV Your Morning, weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern, 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV CTV News Channel and on your CTV News app.
We are starting the podcast this week with a man who really needs no introduction if you're a Toronto Maple Leafs fan.
Matt Sandin clocked nearly 1,000 games in the blue and white. 840 of those was as captain. And during his 13 seasons with the Leafs, he became the franchise's leading scorer with the most goals, most assists, most overtime goals, and the list goes on and on.
So now the Hockey Hall of Famer is delving into his journey from the outskirts of Stockholm to stick-handling stardom. Here's Anne-Marie's chat with Matt Sandin.
I loved in this book learning about your family, about your childhood, growing up in Sweden, and I loved this story that your grandmother used to play goalie for you and your brothers, and that was her idea. What was Grandma Marta like as a goalie?
We scored a lot of goals on her. She made some saves. We were just glad to get someone in there in that.
What a great memory. Let's talk about the game. You know, you write about how, the media loved to try and figure out Matt Sandin. And you said you never would read any of the articles. One of the stories that I love that you describe is when you came back to Toronto after leaving.
Yeah.
And, people remember this footage. You were emotional during that game. We saw that. But what we didn't see is what you write about in the book and how you were feeling ahead of time, that you were actually nervous. What were you worried about?
I was always nervous for a game. I think that and we talk about, that knot in the stomach is something that I miss today too. It's business time, right? You have to perform, you have to get there. And if you don't have that knot, the performance is not going to be as good. So that's something I'm missing now. But as soon as you hit the ice, it was gone, right? It's something you've done millions of times, skating and playing games.
But that game in particular, you weren't just nervous about the game. You were nervous about the fans and how they react. What happened when you walked into the arena?
I had a tough time falling asleep the day before, coming back, and with the commotion that went on when I had played my last year for the Leafs. And I think 13 years with the team, 11 years as a captain, it gets personal. It meant so much to me all those years for me and my family. So it was hard coming back. Once the game started, it was tough to focus just on the game, like in a normal way. But great memory.
Yeah, and great memory for fans too. I can't help but thinking, and I'm glad you put this story in the book. You arrive in this city, and you came at a time, you were traded for a beloved member of this team, for Wendell Clark. You're a young man, you're a foreigner, which is how they would have described you then, being from Sweden. You didn't orchestrate this trade, but you were the public face of it. And how difficult was that transition? Because fans actively disliked you, and it took a long time for them to give you the credit that you were showing them on the ice.
Oh, for sure. And lucky enough, maybe, I didn't understand how big the shoes were that I had to fill after Wendell Clark until I got here. And
what
totally
told you?
Different. Just the question that I got from media. How does it feel trying to fill Wendell Clark's shoes? And completely different style of player. I mean, Wendell was pretty tough. He would drop his gloves fighting, played a real Western Canadian hockey game up and down, and me coming from Europe, all skill, producing goals and points. So it took me a few years to earn the respect from the fans and actually prove that I was worthy the Leafs trading away Wendell.
How did you not let that get in your head?
Well, I don't know. I think my demeanor and the way we write it in the book, just the upbringing and everything. I was very fortunate to have parents, very safe environment growing up. And I think that really helped me, and we reflect on that in the book. It really helped me prepare for what's coming, representing the Toronto Maple Leafs and being the captain.
I want to ask you about a little secret you reveal in the book, that there's a secret club nestled in the ACC that most people don't know about.
It was.
It is called the Cotton Club. Can you tell that story to us?
Yeah, and you reflect back, and I'm glad I did the book now when I'm a little bit older, because you realize a place like that where, you know, there's a laundry machine, there's a little couch there, and guys could get away after the game and hang
Wait, the laundry machine? So you're in the laundry room?
The laundry room, yeah. The Cotton Club was a laundry room, and trainers are running in and out after the game, and guys would come in there, just sit down and relax for a bit and talk about everything else but hockey, right? So, but it's an off button at the same time mentally, because with the pressure, the game's been going on, there's a lot of guys been dealing with the media before, so you just come in there, sit down and relax and get the pressure out of the system was actually important for those years.
I can't imagine you guys sitting amongst all the dirty, sweaty whatnots of after a hockey game, having those kinds of conversations. Hey, Matt Sandin, it was really great to have you here. I got to ask you one last question before you go, because you dedicate this book to your 3 children who are 12, 10, and 7. Was it harder being a coach of the captain of the Leafs, or being a dad of 3?
Easy question. It's tougher to be the dad with 3 kids.
It's a great book and a great one for fans as well. It is called Home and Away. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, I want to bring in one of our producers here in your morning, Katie Jameson, who produced this chat with Matt Sandin. Katie, first of all, I always love to check in with you, because how people are in the green room really sets up how the conversation goes. And he was lovely.
He was. And I think what viewers might not realize is when a guest comes in, they spend a little bit of time in our green room ahead of time, and you see them when they come on stage, but when they're backstage, you get a different vibe from them.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do. And with Matt's, when he came in with his publicist, his Canadian publicist, and the woman who wrote the book, Amy Stewart. And so I had a nice chat with her about what it was like shadowing this legend for nearly a year, and she got to meet his friends and family, and she traveled back to Sweden with him. And it was a cool conversation.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I ask you, because a lot of times these memoirs are put together, and how they're put together is so interesting, right? So you've got a big name celebrity athlete, whatever it is, and then you have what you say, like a writer.
Yeah.
So how does that process work?
I think it's probably different for each author, but with Amy, Amy writes fiction in her real life, her non-shadowing legend life, and this was her first crack at writing someone else's story, so you really have to get into their headspace, which is tricky. But she said that she really enjoyed working with Matt, and they'd had a little bit of, not friction in a bad way, but they definitely went back and forth, because he's notoriously reserved and doesn't want to talk about his personal life.
He's very private.
And she wanted those little nuggets of the personal element. And so she really had to push him to write about his wife, which he did. And then after the fact, he was really thankful that chapter got put in, because his wife was really happy about it.
Yeah, didn't he phone her to say thank you? He phoned Amy?
Yeah, he did.
Well, you think it must be so beneficial if you're writing your life story to have somebody who gets literature, who gets books, to be able to say, hey, this is going to be a page turner, or this isn't, or put this in, or take this out.
Yeah.
You need the expert.
And you need someone who's going to listen. So it sounded like they had a really good relationship between the two of them.
Yeah, so much so that he brought her with him
and
on
that's
this tour.
unusual. They don't typically come in with the person who wrote it. It's usually just the frontward-facing person that comes in.
Something you and I were talking about, Katie, and I thought this was interesting. So when you look at Matt Sandin and his kids, they are 12, 10, and 7. This is his old job in Canada. Like, they have no clue who Matt Sandin is. So I asked him about that, and he said he brought them to Muskoka this summer, and he told the driver to pull over, and he took them to his statue. And they were kind of like, okay, and they took a picture at the statue, and he said they kind of didn't get it. But what he loves about Canadian fans is they'll just call out, hey, Matts, which doesn't happen in Sweden. And he goes, after a while, at first his kids thought it was weird, but then he said he could tell afterwards they were pretty proud.
I love that. And it's so true. I like to think that his kids have no idea how big he is here. Like, there's no way that he could walk half a block without somebody calling out Matt or Matt Sandin.
But isn't that just like parenting in a nutshell? That like, you're no big deal. But like, for him, just even saying his name, saying Matt's, the reaction of the crew, the people who are lifelong Leafs fans, that was staggering for them.
That was really cool.
And then to his kids, he's just dad.
I know.
Katie, you meet a lot of sports athletes, celebrities, and everything, but what stood out to you about Matt Sandin?
He was very calm, which I guess isn't surprising, but and it was early in the morning, so that's usually a big grain of salt with people too. But he was just very calm. He was happy to talk about, wherever we wanted to take the interview. There was no kind of pushback, and he was very happy to let Amy have some of the attention in the green room and let her talk about the experience, because he would be the one getting all the attention. And I thought that was kind of classy to just turn things over to her. And I really enjoyed chatting with her too.
Yeah, and he called her in for pictures afterwards, which again, I thought was, I mean, that's a very captain move of him, right? To bring everybody
bring the team in.
Bring the team together. Oh, Katie, thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Katie.
Thanks for having me.
Will you come back?
Maybe.
Okay. Jeffrey Archer has sold more than 300 million copies of his books worldwide, and he's about to sell more after the release of his newest novel, An Eye for an Eye.
So this book is the newest installment in his beloved William Warwick series.
Anne-Marie had the chance to catch up with him when he joined us live from London. Here's that interview.
Mr. Warwick is back on the case in this book. Set it up for us. What's going on this time?
Well, he's now reached the rank of commander, and the Prime Minister has asked a banker to go to Saudi Arabia and close a deal for £3 billion, an arms deal. And our man goes across and he realizes he has to have an agent, and he picks a Lebanese agent who takes him to a nightclub, and they witness a murder. And the agent suggests he goes back to his hotel as quickly as possible so that he's not involved. And the following morning, he's arrested for the murder. And the Prime Minister then has to call on our hero and get him into action. So William Warwick strides on the scene.
Jeffrey, can I talk to you about your process and your intensity in putting these books together? Because for your last book, when you and I were speaking, you were telling us that you had a jeweler make a replica of the crown jewels. And this time around, you've recreated the Declaration of Independence and a Rembrandt. Both play a role in this new book. We love the lengths that you go to. Why? How did having these two pieces made change the process of writing this book?
Very good question. And the answer has to be that I had to believe the reader would accept that a copy of a Rembrandt would pass muster with most people. Indeed, when our man is in jail, the wicked Miles Faulkner finds out that his mother is in possession of a Rembrandt and goes to her home in Buckingham and... No, I won't tell you anymore.
In the book, you talk about this now. There's this friendship that develops between the art forger and the policeman who arrested him. And in real life, this is amazing. The artist you had do the replica was actually convicted of forgery. Sometimes I think you do these things just to make you a really great dinner party guest. Tell me about the artist and why you chose him.
Well, they discover, of course, that Thomas Jefferson, when he was in Paris, actually hand wrote a copy of the Declaration of Independence. Now, a declaration sold recently, a copy, Anne-Marie, sold recently for a copy for 7.7 million. So I rang Sotheby's and said, how much if I had a real copy written by Thomas Jefferson? And they said, about 100 million, Jeffrey.
Wow, 100 million. Here's something that you and Thomas Jefferson have in common, in that you also write out longhand your novels, I understand. Do you still do that? Did you do that for this one?
I still write every word longhand. I can't use machinery because I don't know how to work it. I'm pretty good at turning on a light, but my wife says I don't turn them off enough. But other than that, no, I handwrite every single word. And the draft you have in front of you is the 14th. I wish there was a shorter process, but even in old age, I find you've got to put the work in.
I love that, pen to paper. This is the penultimate book in your William Warwick crime series, and it's hard to believe, I think for readers, it's coming to an end. How are you feeling wrapping up this character?
Well, my problem is, dare I say it, slightly changing the subject, is I'm 84 years old. I don't know how much longer I've got to live. I've reached this is the penultimate book in the William Warwick series, An Eye for an Eye. I am now working on the final book in the series, which will be ready this time next year. And I'm then going to write what I hope will be the biggest book I've ever written in my life. I think it's a better outline theme, and I've done a 100-page. 6 years ago, I came up with the idea, and I've written a 100-page outline theme, and I hope it's bigger than Cain and Abel, and it will be my last book.
Really? Jeffrey, I'm sad to hear you say that, although I would like to
applaud you at 84 years young for the incredible work that you've done and that you're putting together books with a 100-page outline. Always a pleasure to have you with us here on Your Morning. And a reminder to everybody, this book that we're talking about today, An Eye for an Eye, is available now. Jeffrey, have a wonderful day. Thank you.
You too. Thank you very much for having me on your wonderful show.
Oh, we were having a good laugh about this morning. Remember to reach your parents at work before cell phones were a thing? Think about it. See if your experience matches this woman's.
You know what's really crazy? Gen Z will never get this. For millennials, this is a deep cut. Why did we call our parents on the phone at their workplace? Like, we would literally just interrupt their workday to ask them really dumb questions. Sometimes you'd have to talk to a receptionist before you got to your actual parent, and then you'd get on the phone to your parent and go, oh, can Sarah come over?
Yes.
You'd be like, can I have a paddle pop? And your mum's like fully at work. Sometimes you'd call them multiple times, talk to the receptionist multiple times.
Yes.
And the questions were so dumb because we didn't have text and it was weird to send a fax. Like, I remember calling my mum at her place of work once to ask if I could have frozen peas.
That's so funny.
That is
So
very
true.
relatable. I remember I would call, first of all, I would never call my dad. Unless,
Always
like,
call mom?
Always call mom, who was very busy, and then you'd have to talk to the receptionist, and then you get put on hold. And if she chose to answer the phone because the light was flashing on her desk, she'd be like, "What do you want?"
Yes.
And it was never important.
Never. My mom was a nurse, and so now.
Oh, no, Kelsey.
I know.
Oh, she get paged?
Yes. And now knowing the strain on the healthcare system, the fact that I called that charge nurse so many times to be like, "Hi, may I please speak with Sonia Morrison?" And they would be like, "Oh, God."
Your kid's on the phone.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel awful.
We used to do that thing where if I wanted to get picked up because I refused to walk home that day, remember collect calling?
Yes.
Yeah.
Remember
Yes.
collect calling? So, and I'm sure other people did this too, but you know in the spot where you're supposed to say your name, it's like, say your name, and you'd be like, Lindsay, and then when they would pick up on the other end. Collect calling was like you didn't have a quarter to put it in the payphone.
Yep.
So you'd call the operator, but it was like automated, so then you'd say your name, and so on the other end, when your parent picked up on the phone, it'd be like, you have a call from Lindsay, and whatever, and then I'd talk to them, and they'd pay, do you accept the charges? But instead of saying Lindsay, I would always say, I need to be picked up right now.
Yeah. And that way they wouldn't get charged for
That's
the call.
right. So my mom on the other end would get a phone call being like, you have a call from, I need to get the right there now. That would be what it was. That was the move.
That's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I saved her money.
Yes.
Not time, but money. You know, the other thing we used to do, you just reminded me in the intro, is that you've never seen anymore, is when we moved to South Africa. So we moved to Johannesburg when I was 15 years old.
Yeah.
And the way I communicated with my friends was by fax.
Really?
Oh, that's funny.
Yes.
I never did
and
that
it was
as a
the
teenager.
fax. Well, I was far away, and the letters took a while. So the fax, and you could hear the fax machine like from down the hall. Yeah, and it was that fax paper that if you like put your nail across, it was yellow, and it would right.
Yeah.
And what was it, thermal? Attila was telling me thermal paper. Yeah. And so that's how we would get, and they would roll up and land on the ground.
Yes.
That's how we communicated.
Oh,
That was our email system because there was no email yet.
But do you know what I appreciate? Maybe not about faxes, but I appreciate about the phone call is that you had to learn how to talk to somebody on the phone as a kid.
Yes.
You had to learn how to talk
That's
to grown-ups.
true.
Like, do you remember calling your friend's house to talk to your friend, but then you'd have to have the uncomfortable conversation with the parent?
Yes.
Always.
And they would always ask you weird questions, and you would just have to
Yes.
stand there politely but engage. Whereas, like, I had my kid, even like I'll call home, I'll call Jay to talk to one of the kids, and he'll hand the kids the
don't know
phone,
what to
and
do.
they don't know they don't know where to hold it. They look at it,
Yes.
and then
That's funny.
I can just tell they're like,
What do I do with this?
Okay, they have no idea.
like, open your mouth and say words because I can't see you.
And the kids have said that. Like when they were little, they're like, Daddy, I can't see you. I'm like, because it's not a FaceTime call. I'm like, how do I explain this?
Oh, my mom was a realtor, and so before like text paging, there was voice paging. So if I needed to go to Sally's house, she would get a page wherever she was showing houses being, Muriel, your daughter would like you to call her so she could go to Sally's. Sorry, Mom. We're glad you're enjoying Your Morning, the podcast. Every week, we bring you some of our most interesting conversations from the show on a wide variety of topics. And of course, you can always join us live weekdays, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern and 7 to 10 a.m. Atlantic on CTV CTV News Channel, or on your CTV News app. For nearly 2 months now, students in Ontario schools have been living with the government's updated cell phone ban. In high schools, that means phones can only be used outside of class time, requiring students, teachers, and parents to adapt to a new reality. So we wanted to check in on how that transition is going, both for students and for teachers. We're going to start with Jason Bradshaw. He's a high school science teacher, and he's joining us this morning from Brampton. Good morning, Mr. Bradshaw.
Good morning.
How has the ban changed things in your classes? What have you noticed?
Well, it hasn't actually made the dramatic changes that some people might expect, because honestly, we've had what's been called a cell phone ban since 2019. And even before that ban, it's always been kind of a common sense approach where I think teachers have been allowing students to use cell phones in their classrooms, but only at their discretion and when it's beneficial to the activities or the learning that we're doing. So that's still what we're seeing in my classroom and in a lot of high school classrooms as well, I believe. I think the only real difference is because it's been so talked about in the media, a lot of parents and families are a little bit more aware of the expectations, and that goes to the students and children as well. So I think people know a little bit more of what to expect and how cell phones may or may not be used in the classroom. But in a lot of ways, it's what we've had before, and it's what we've already been used to.
There was a lot of discussion around enforcement and the fact that it fell on teachers to be the ones to enforce this new cell phone ban. How's that going?
Again, in a lot of ways, it's similar to what we've always had. But because there's been this major focus on it in the recent months, and even towards the end of the last school year, I think there's a lot more support from the top down. So school administrators are definitely being very consistent, more so in what may have been happening in the past, because I think there's been a more direct and clear message about what's expected. So there's definitely been support from school leadership. I know that in the past, a lot of teachers felt a little bit uncomfortable with the prospect of maybe having to take a cell phone away from a child because they never knew if there would be pushback from the child, from their family. But because the policy has been communicated so frequently and so clearly, we're all on the same page. We know that our school administrators will have our backs, and we know that the message has been communicated to parents about what to expect as well.
So what does it look like in reality in your class, Mr. Bradshaw? I mean, are students out have their phones out on the desk and they're just not using them? You know I have a couple of high school students in our house, and they said that there are some students who set it up inside their laptop. So if you find any of that sort of stuff going on, how do you call that out?
Well, I think it's all about making sure the expectations are well known from the beginning of the school year. And in my classroom, I try to incorporate cell phone use when it can be done positively and when it relates to the work that we're doing, because cell phones are powerful tools and it's part of the world that we live in. So I've never liked the idea of a complete cell phone ban where we try to revert things back to like the 1990s, which I think is maybe what some people envision or maybe even what they're hoping for. For me, I just make it clear to my students there are times when cell phones need to be away. That means off the desk, out of sight, completely away from your field of vision, so you're not being distracted. There are other times when I actively encourage them to use the cell phones because they can be used as tools for gathering data, for research, especially in my science classroom. It's a valuable miniature computer, especially when most students don't have their own laptops and we can't afford to give them each a laptop. So there are times when I encourage the use of phones because they are a useful tool. And there are times when I kind of say it's like passive use time where they might be working independently. And a lot of students actually focus a lot better when they can just maybe put in their AirPods and listen to some music while they're studying. Right. So it's just about letting students know what the expectation is from moment to moment. And they get used to it. And of course, they need subtle reminders sometimes. But most kids want to be successful. They want to learn while they're in school. So they usually follow the directives.
All right, I want to bring in Rohan S to this conversation. You might remember him. He's a grade 12 student who was part of our student panel on the cell phone ban. He joined us last month. So, Rohan, welcome back.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. You look like you're on your way to class as well. How are you and how are you and your peers adapting to the new policy?
Well, I think it's definitely as like Mr. Bradshaw said, it's been an adjustment, but I think the schools have really helped us in the sense where their punishment, although it's been strict, it's kind of been a little bit lax in the sense where if they see you with your phone, they just take it away. They don't necessarily like suspend you or anything like that. So it allows like students to be a little bit more accommodating towards the new ban, and it allows students to actually adjust to it, which I think has been pretty good.
Has there been any resistance from students to hand it over? I know that was a concern for teachers. And have you had a chance to witness any sort of back and forth between a teacher and a student who may not want to give up a cell phone?
Well, yeah, 100%. Like there has definitely been some clash in terms of that. Like people are, of course, like not resistant to give up their properties because their phones are their properties. But at the end of the day, when like I think people are pretty accepting to the idea that when you're on school, it's school's time and it's not necessarily your phone time. So if the school wants to take your phone, they have every right to do so. And like after kind of the first 2 weeks where that became like a common practice of the teachers just kind of taking the phones if they see them out, then that's something students have just naturally adjusted to.
Yeah, you've also shared that this ban is leading to what you describe as better organizing between students and parents. What does that mean?
Well, yeah. So I think like, especially at my school where we're not allowed our phones at all. We're not even allowed them during lunch. We're not allowed them during our preps, nothing. So with that, you have to be a lot more organized in terms of how you're going to get picked up per se. Mm-hmm. You have to talk about with your parents in the morning. Oh, like I need you to pick me up at like 3:30, for example. And you actually have to show up on time, which I think is like a new practice. Because before, like when we had phones, you didn't necessarily have to like be always on time, although it would be like helpful, obviously, because you could always just text your parents and be like, oh, I need 15 minutes. But this new process of having no phones makes sure that and teaches students that they have to stay true to their word, because you truly have no way to communicate with your parents on school property. So it's just like it forces them to stay true to their word and actually like follow through on their commitments 100%.
All right, well, the education minister has said multiple times that this is part of what they hope to be a culture change for students and cell phones. Do you think that it's working?
I think although it's helping students distance from the actual devices, I don't think it is a positive change in the sense where phones are always going to be present, whether that you go to university, whether you go into the workplace, they're always going to be present. Mm-hmm. And I think in school, if they would help us develop more of a positive relationships with phones instead of kind of just alienating them and removing them from our lives, that would be a lot more helpful. Because now when students, say for example, I'm in grade 12, right? I've had phones throughout my entire high school career. Mm-hmm. That's good for me because I know how to use them within the context of academics. But for students going into grade 12s who are starting to use their phone a little more and like just high school period, they are not going to be able to learn how to use phones. So when they go to university or when they enter the workplace, they're having their phones on them 24/7 and being in an academic context or a working context, it's going to be hard for them to adjust to that kind of environment.
Rohan, let me ask you personally then. You're somebody who has grown up with cell phones in classrooms. Now you've got this ban in place. How are you coping?
It was definitely an adjustment in the first 2 weeks, that's for sure. Like, just kind of having the natural intuition to just check your phone, especially like my school sends all their announcements through email and we get it during our mentor time, and our mentor time is just kind of like our homeroom. So we don't really have our computers out. So it was just nice having, I guess, your phone there for like efficiency purposes. It was just easier to check information and stay on top of my like things. But now I've honestly found that I've become more organized because of it. And it's actually promoted more engagement within the student body. Like, for example, I run DECA as one of our clubs, and we've had the like highest registration ever because I think mainly because of the phone ban and because people want something to do during lunch.
Oh, that's really interesting. Hey, Rohan, great to check in with you again. We're going to let you get to class. Thank you.
This conversation around cell phones and schools, I mean, it's such a hot topic in our household. Our daughter, Brooklyn, she's in grade 7, and, you know, her friends are starting to get cell phones. Mm-hmm. We're part of this group trying to enforce wait till 8, which is that whole idea of waiting to give a cell phone to your child until 8th grade or grade 8.
Yeah.
And so we're really, we're sticking to it.
I was going to say, how's that going?
It's going well. We do, I mean, Brooklyn constantly asks for one, right? And then, you know, she's pleading her case. We are also, I mean, on this show, we hear so much information about just the fact that waiting a little bit longer is so much more beneficial.
Yeah.
And even, you know, Brooklyn went to a birthday party recently, and the mom asked us ahead of time if it was okay if she collected all of the cell phones or any sort of computers that the kids had coming in and put them in a bin and said, okay, so now you guys can interact. And she said it was just like a game changer.
Yeah.
Because they were looking at each other, interacting, kind of like what we used to do.
That's right.
growing up, right?
Well, and it's interesting for people who don't know, in Ontario, the cell phone ban is in high school. So you saw our high school student. They are allowed to bring the phones with them to school. They can have them in class. They just can't be visible. So you can have it in a backpack or whatever. But in elementary school, in the middle school, it's no cell phones allowed. And are they allowed to bring them to school?
They can bring them to school, but they have to keep them in their lockers. And by the way, that also includes like a smartwatch as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. And I caution everything I say with that we're not there yet. And so I don't want to be the person who doesn't have kids yet, who's a perfect parent, who has lots of advice about it, because we haven't had tons of conversations yet about cell phones. But what I do keep in the back of my mind was something you said to me, Anne-Marie, years and years ago.
Every time you do this to me, Kelsey, I panic slightly. I don't know what I said and if it still applies.
No, because you're just like the bar is set for parenting when I look at you. So you said this to me and you said—
I'm here too, just so you know.
You are.
Yeah, I mean, I know I set the bar in my own way.
Okay, here's the advice. Here's the advice. You said a conversation you had with your kids was about the science and the data and the research that had gone into devices and social media and different types of communication, whether it's through video games or not. And the science and the research is overwhelmingly negative. And you said, listen, I will listen to your argument if you show me the studies that say that this is good for you. And until you can do that, we're going to go with what Dad and I decide. And so for us, cell phones and the idea of social media is one of those hard lines where I say, this is my rule, and this is what we're going to do. Now, where we get from here, like my kids are 3, 7, and 10. So, and I say, that's why I give this asterisk of, I don't want to preach because we're not really there yet. But I hope that we can hold the line, because when I talk to teens, they say, not a single one of them will say, we're mad that our parents made us wait. They'll say it was hard, it was kind of weird and uncomfortable when all our friends had it. But they don't go back and say, yeah, I wish I had been a zombie on my phone.
The tough part of this, and I know we've talked about this before, is that the way that teens and preteens communicate, they communicate over Snap, right? So once you take that away, and that's not part of their everyday, like they're kind of excluded from those conversations that are happening, so it's a really tough one.
Can I put an asterisk on that conversation you and I had? Because what you might also remember is that Maxim, after Daryl and I said that, turned to us and he's like, sometimes I really hate your job. So there's the other side of that. And you know, what's great is, with Among Us, but also when you're talking about friend groups and doing this as a group, that's what's really helpful is when you've got other people with the buy-in. But like my daughter Annabelle and Lindsay recently had a conversation because she was wondering about Brooklyn doing one of the social media platforms.
That was awesome. I called Anne-Marie and she was in the car with her. And so Annabelle literally walked me through the benefits and the pros and cons of this, whatever app I was, or whatever social media platform I was asking about. Because I've listened to it before, but to actually have my daughter say, I want to be on this platform, whatever it was, and to have Annabelle say, okay, here's what we really use it for. To have a 17-year-old walk me through that was so helpful. She is now going to be my pickup, and I need to call her.
I love that all of us do what we do in our jobs, which is just research, just interview experts if we need something to do. Anyway.
I know. And speaking of smartphones and social media, you or your kids might have seen a lot of Andrew Garfield or Florence Pugh lately as they make the rounds for their new movie. And Kels, you were able to speak with the two stars and their director. Here's that conversation.
Friends, let me tell you, Florence Pugh's and Andrew Garfield's brand new movie. It is heartbreaking and it is beautiful. It's called We Live in Time. It follows a couple as they embark on a path challenged by the limits of time. I had the chance to sit down with them, with Florence and with Andrew, and director John Crowley, to talk all about this making of this emotional and captivating love story. Take a look.
There is something that your daddy and I...
There's something that Mummy and me want to
talk to you about.
How did it feel taking on a role like this, having lost your own mum to cancer?
Yeah, I feel like a privilege, and I think that the way it was written was so sensitive and felt so tender and caring and nuanced and life-affirming in all of the loss, and so much beauty in the loss and the grief, and so much love. And it is that strange, mysterious setup that we can only go as high as we can go low. Like we can only go as deep as we can go high. And so the amount of love we feel for each other in this very strange, surreal time we have on this planet will be matched by the amount of grief we have when we lose each other.
I'm Alma, by the way. Alma.
I knew that Florence was an actor of supreme, unmatched talent and depth of soul. I'd seen it in the films that she had done. We had all the right ingredients, and then it was like, well, let's see if it works. And we just kind of gave it the old college try, and I think we're all pretty relieved and happy that
we're chuffed.
We're chuffed. We had the experience we had, and then the film is beautiful. So yeah,
it's a movie that celebrates it all.
Yeah.
And even if you go in knowing what the outcome is going to be, and knowing that at some point you're going to feel so sad, it's a celebration of all of it across the board. It's a celebration of living, it's a celebration of love, it's a celebration of trying, it's a celebration of failing, and it's just like what life is about. And if you are lucky enough to ever be in love in the way that these people are, which hopefully everybody is, then it's a reminder of how much we have with each other, how much time we have, and to not in any way let any of it go without noticing it.
I've had 3 kids, and I just say well done, because you nailed that scene. That was everything that birth is. And your face, Andrew, like that was my husband through all births. You were downtown, like you were right in it. How do you guys even film a scene like that? It's intimate and it's gritty and it's hilarious. Where does that come from?
I really, really know how important it is when women watch births on screen, and whether it's right or wrong. So I wanted to really get like the sounds right and understand the mechanics of when the baby drops, like what does that feel like, where is that pain, and that also just came from the precision in the script, the dedication of what John was trying to shoot, and creating a safe space so that both Andrew and I could just give it a go at giving birth to a child that wasn't actually coming out.
And you've got all of that going on, absolutely really, and 2 great actors playing moments with each other as well, finding connection between each other in the scene, and then in comes a baby who doesn't really care if it's going to ruin the sound take. It's just going to cry when it wants to cry, and suddenly this sort of primal sort of
all over my and pissing all over my hand.
This just sort of primal need just emerged into the scene and was like, no, I'm the center of the universe, and you could feel the whole change happening in it. So it was quite profound.
Passing the baby through my
real life
baby,
newborn.
Andrew passing her through my legs, and then you having to quickly slump back because I now had the baby. It was so beautiful. And then this little baby with these massive eyes was just connecting with both of us. And then she put her hand on my mouth and she fell asleep.
Oh my God. The film captures life so beautifully, and congratulations again. Thank you for the opportunity to chat with you today.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for being with us today.
For more great conversations, download or hit subscribe to Your Morning, the podcast. It's on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
And don't forget, we'd love for you to watch us live weekday mornings on CTV CTV News Channel, or on the CTV News app. Start your morning with us.